that fact, that reality needs to come out, and we need to find out who the guilty parties were, who cannibalized the stuff and then stole half of the maintenance budget, and that's where we are today.
Who turned the lights out, and how do we get them to come back on again? Well, somebody who has a few ideas is Ted Blom. He is an independent energy analyst. So Ted, let's start off with this load shedding level 6. This has really crippled the economy this week and has impacted on people's lives. How did we get into this situation at the moment, and how long do we expect this stage 6 to continue?
Okay, I think it's important to dissect the various factors that have impacted upon Eskom over the last week or so. One of the issues that certainly is of great importance is the fact that Eskom lost the conveyor at Medupi again. It's not the first time. You'll recall about a year ago they had a similar problem, and where they used front-end loaders to convey the coal from the mine to the power station, which is absolutely pathetic. And I'm surprised that a year later, no extra redundancy has been built into the system. So yes, again, part and parcel of the load shedding, or 900 megawatts of the load shedding, one level of load shedding, is directly attributable to the fact that Medupi couldn't get coal into the staves and into the boilers. So that's the one issue. The second issue is Eskom mentioned that they had a lot of rain in Mpumalanga. I've been in contact with my contacts in Mpumalanga. As you know, I'm very closely associated with the coal mining industry. And not one of those mines have declared force majeure because of excess rain. So I don't know what rain Eskom's referring to that's now hampered their situation. Then back to the real issues, Eskom said that the strike is illegal and that the workers are not complying with the regulations. The fact of the matter, there was a CBF meeting earlier on this week, and for those who don't know, it's a consultative bargaining forum which is supposed to take place annually between Eskom and the unions. And Eskom came to the meeting, offered a number or spoke about a number, and then promptly walked out of that meeting unilaterally, and didn't give any indication as to whether it's going to be postponed or whether it's going to be deferred or whether the unions must wait for them to come back or whatever. They just walked out of the meeting, apparently on instruction of the CEO. And I think the last thing in Eskom's mind is that they thought that the unions would take some sort of measure to retaliate, because legally, as you know, the workers are classified as essential workers and legally are not allowed to strike. My own personal opinion is that it's unconstitutional to have an imbalance in the rights between the workers and the employer. You will recall that the symbol for justice is scales, and the scales need to be in equilibrium. And you can't have the employer have all the scales in its favor, where it can just whack the unions left, right, and center, and the unions will stand there and smile. So what the unions then did is they did some sort of protest action, including throwing some coal on the road. As far as I'm concerned, that is not sabotage. You've got to be a real fool to call that sabotage. It's another form of picketing in my language. If you want to see sabotage, go and have a look at what happened before 1994, when the ANC and the government were at war with each other, and blew buildings up and blew cars up and did all sorts of sabotage activities. As far as the odd Molotov cocktail or whatever is concerned that the minister proudly displayed to the public, anybody with any bit of experience will tell you that was an amateur effort, and there's no evidence to show, as with all the other so-called sabotage efforts that Eskom's alleged, where they have not been able to corner a perpetrator and take the matter through the courts. So unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but I take whatever Eskom says with a pinch of salt. The fact of the matter is, De Ruyter has cut the maintenance budget by 75%. He's complained about old plant, and the chickens are now coming home to roost.
All right, Ted, so correct me if I'm wrong. We're recording at about midday on Thursday, and Eskom, their original wage proposal was a 5.3% increase. That was then rejected. The unions walked out of that negotiation. Eskom also walked out. And now there's this proposal of a 7% negotiated fee. So our work is going to be returning to the stations on Friday. What is the current status with that?
Okay, so it's a very difficult situation, David, because last year's wage negotiations have not yet been settled. There was a dispute declared between the parties, and it was escalated to the CCMA. And you will understand, as even on a basic mathematical basis, that you need a foundation on which to base the increase on. Now, to the extent that there's been no agreement between Eskom and the unions over last year's wage negotiation, it's impossible to then add whatever current negotiation is agreed between the parties onto a number that isn't determined from last year. So the only way that I can see this thing petering out and getting resolved tomorrow is that the Eskom either capitulates about last year's negotiations and comes to a number that's acceptable to the unions. And I'll just remind you that the offer that Eskom tabled last year was actually a reduction in the package of the unions by about between 1.5% and 1.5%, which the unions, I mean, they're not stupid. They've also got people who do the calculations for them, and they found it unacceptable. And that's why the thing was escalated to the CCMA. Now, if you don't have a foundation number from last year, I don't know how you add the current offer to a number that's indeterminate from last year to come to a new number. So either these parties sit down in very strong determination and agree last year's number very quickly, and then say, okay, well, on top of last year's number, which you're going to have to back pay me anyway, you're going to pay me the extra 5.4 or 7% or whatever's on the table to make peace between the parties now. Just to take you back to last year. Last year, Eskom applied to NERSA for 5.4% wage increase for the laborers. And that was granted by NERSA. So in the Eskom application, they have to give a breakdown. They want so much for coal, they want so much for diesel fuel, they want so much for wages. And NERSA granted them 5.4% for wages. In the wisdom of the executive of Eskom, they then decided to take that money and spend it elsewhere and not give it to the laborers. And that's what that big dispute is all about. And if I can give you an analogy, it's like you and I standing at the robots begging for money because we're poor. We get some money from NERSA or whoever the people are that give us money, and then we go to the bottle store and go and buy booze. The fact of the matter is you can't, if you've been allocated money by the regulator, and I've cleared this up with the regulator, you cannot reappropriate that money to other expenses. If you want to reappropriate that money, you need to go back to the regulator and say, listen here, I asked for 5.4%. I no longer want the 5.4% for the wages. I rather want to reallocate it to debt or wherever else you want to put it and get approval, new approval from the regulator. That has not happened. Eskom, in its own claims that they have sole discretion to reappropriate the money to wherever they think it's a worthy cause. And that's where the major breakdown in relationships came between the unions and Eskom over last year's dispute. So we're sitting with quite a conundrum now. It's not just one wage issue, it's two wage issues, last year's wage issue and this year's wage issue. And I pray to the Lord that this whole dilemma is sorted out tomorrow, because as you correctly said in your opening sentence, this economy has already shed more than 3 million jobs over the last 12 years because of Eskom's load shedding and mismanagement. And heavens knows where we're going to go to going forward if this situation isn't sorted out and this load shedding isn't sorted out, and if the rater doesn't get his act together and fix up the plant. On paper, he's got 52 gigawatts of power. Why can't he generate 34 gigawatts of electricity as the demand is at yesterday? I mean, there's something wrong. He's getting money from NERSA, a return on investment on plant of 52 gigawatts, and yet 20 or 18 gigawatts has disappeared into thin air, and nobody has explained it. And that's why I've called for a proper forensic investigation to see what's happened. I think I know what's happened. They've cannibalized the stuff. And that's why they're not able to bring it back into operation. But that fact, that reality needs to come out, and we need to find out who the guilty parties were who cannibalized the stuff and then stole half of the maintenance budget, and that's where we are today.
Right, Ted. Well, I think this conversation really illustrates the problems with having an energy monopoly in South Africa that is concentrating power generation and distribution in the hands of Eskom. And what it amounts to is now there's this single point of failure. So if there's some intractable conflict between the workers and management, well, then no power for the whole country.
To its knees, and that's not acceptable. So I agree with you. You know, I'm a free marketeer and a capitalist. Unfortunately, I don't have the bank balance to show that, but hopefully I have enough life left in me to fix it up. But the fact of the matter is that this whole idea of a controlled electricity sector is antiquated, and the sector needs to be opened up and forget about all the caps. And if anybody can produce power cheaply, it should be made available, and whoever wants to buy that power should buy it. To force people into renewables and all sorts of other sort of channels where more state capture can take place is absolutely unacceptable from where we are standing today. And I agree with you. We need to diversify our energy sources, because we cannot afford to have the whole economy come shut down because of one intractable set of management.
Ted Blom, thank you very much. Let's hand over to you, our audience. What do you think is the cause of Eskom's current woes? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. Also, if you enjoyed this analysis, you might want to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And do remember to keep warm in these cold and dark times. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.